faint scent of her perfume, usually a comfort, now clung to the air like a shroud, suffocating me. It was the same scent I'd bought her for our anniversary, a subtle blend of jasmine and sandalwood. Now it was just another layer of the lie. My name is Ethan, and until yesterday, I had it all. A corner office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, a reputation as one of the firm's sharpest legal minds, and a wife, Cindy, whose laughter used to be the soundtrack to my life. We were the power couple, the ones everyone envied. I was 35 at the peak of my career, poised for partnership. My boss, John Frost, was my mentor, a man I respected, almost revered. He'd taken me under his wing straight out of law school, taught me the ropes, and pushed me to excel. Cindy, a brilliant marketing executive in her own right, often socialized with us, a charming addition to client dinners and corporate events. Our lives were intertwined, a tapestry of ambition, love, and shared success, or so I thought. The discovery wasn't a dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no slam doors. It was far more insidious, a quiet, venomous whisper in the digital ether. I was working late, as usual, tying up loose ends on the sterling acquisition. John had left his laptop open on his desk, a habit he often indulged in, trusting the late-night silence of the office. A notification popped up on his screen, an email from an unknown sender, subject line, "Re, our little arrangement." Curiosity, a dangerous beast, gnawed at me. I knew I shouldn't, but my fingers moved on their own, clicking the preview. The first line hit me like a physical blow. Cindy confirms she's handled Ethan's performance review. The board will have no choice but to let him go next quarter. My breath hitched. Cindy, my wife, and John, my mentor. The words swam before my eyes, blurring into an incomprehensible mess. My mind, usually a fortress of logic and reason, crumbled. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated, cold-blooded maneuver to dismantle my career, my life. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional. A double-edged sword plunged deep into the very core of my existence. I scrolled down, my heart hammering against my ribs, each beat a painful echo of disbelief. There were other emails, fragments of conversations, veiled references to our future and clearing the path. It painted a picture of a long-standing, meticulously planned conspiracy. They weren't just sleeping together, they were plotting against me, to get me fired, to remove me from the equation. A primal scream clawed at my throat, but no sound escaped. My hands trembled, but I forced them still. The initial shock, the raw, visceral pain, gave way to something colder, sharper. My vulnerability, the feeling of being utterly exposed and shattered, began to recede, replaced by a chilling stillness. I closed the laptop, my movements precise, deliberate. My mind, though reeling, started to process, to analyze. What did they gain? What was the endgame? Partnership for John, perhaps, with Cindy by his side, free from the inconvenience of my presence. The pieces, though horrifying, began to fit into a grotesque puzzle. I walked back to my office, the fluorescent lights humming an indifferent tune, the city lights outside twinkling like mocking eyes. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank screen, my reflection staring back. A man whose world had just imploded, yet whose face remained impassive. The anger was a slow burn, a controlled inferno beneath a placid surface. I felt nothing and everything all at once. The pain was there, a dull ache, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning resolve. They wanted me out? Fine. But they wouldn't see me break. They wouldn't see me fall. Not like this. I spent the rest of the night not in a rage, but in a quiet, meticulous reconstruction of every interaction, every glance, every casual comment. Cindy's sudden interest in my work schedule, John's overly solicitous advice, the subtle shifts in their body language when they thought no one was watching. It was all there, a breadcrumb trail of deceit I had been too blind, too trusting to see. The vulnerability I felt earlier hardened into a steely resolve. The contained reaction was now a rational, albeit terrifying strategy forming in the depths of my mind. They had played their hand. Now it was my turn, and they wouldn't even know the game had changed until it was too late. If you want to see how this story of betrayal and calculated revenge unfolds, make sure to subscribe to follow Ethan's journey. The world hadn't stopped spinning, though mine had shattered into a million pieces. I walked through the front door of our apartment, the key turning with a familiar click, and found Cindy in the living room, scrolling through her phone, a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table. Her smile, usually a beacon, now felt like a carefully constructed mask. "Hey, stranger," she said, her voice light, innocent. "Long night?" "Just wrapping up the sterling deal," I replied, my voice a flat line, devoid of the usual warmth. I watched her, every subtle shift in her eyes, the way her fingers tapped a little too quickly on the screen. She offered to make dinner, a gesture I usually welcomed, but tonight it felt like another performance. I declined, citing exhaustion, and retreated to the sanctuary of my study. Apparent normality. It was a fragile shield, but a necessary one. I needed them to believe I was still the same Ethan, oblivious and predictable. Over the next few days, the office became a stage, and I, its most attentive audience. John, ever the charismatic leader, maintained his usual facade. He'd clap me on the shoulder, offer a word of encouragement, discuss strategy, but now I saw the subtle tells. The way his eyes would flick towards Cindy's office door when he thought I wasn't looking, a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips when he mentioned my upcoming performance review. Cindy, too, was a master of deception. She'd ask about my day, feign interest in my cases, even suggest a weekend getaway. But her touch felt hollow, her laughter a little too forced. Her phone was her constant companion, always just out of my sight, her conversations hushed when I entered the room. I noticed a new watch on her wrist, a delicate silver piece I hadn't bought her. A small detail, easily dismissed before, but now it screamed. The anger was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but it wasn't the explosive, irrational kind. It was the kind that fueled a strategist, a lawyer dissecting a complex case. My mind, usually focused on corporate mergers and acquisitions, was now entirely consumed by a different kind of hostile takeover, the reclamation of my life. I saw their betrayal not as an emotional wound, but as a tactical error. They had underestimated me. They had assumed my trust was a weakness, not a foundation they could build upon. My vulnerability had been a temporary state, a brief moment of shock. Now it was a weapon. I began my investigation, not with accusations, but with quiet, methodical precision. My first move was to secure my digital footprint. I backed up every email, every document, every performance review I had ever received at the firm. I created encrypted archives, stored off-site, a digital fortress against any attempt to erase my contributions. I knew the firm's systems inside out, having helped design some of its security protocols. It was child's play to create ghost accounts, to monitor network traffic without leaving a trace. I wasn't looking for proof of their affair. I already had that. I was looking for leverage, for the chinks in John's armor, for the vulnerabilities in their carefully constructed plot. I started with John's past deals. He was known for his aggressive, often ruthless tactics. I remembered whispers, hushed conversations in the break room about a few deals that had gone south, settlements that seemed unusually quiet. Using my access, I delved into archived files, cross-referencing public records and financial statements. It was like sifting through sand for grains of gold, but I was patient. I worked late, often after Cindy was asleep, my laptop screen casting a pale glow on my face. I became a ghost in my own home, a silent observer in my own life. My next step was to subtly shift my professional interactions. I started cultivating relationships with key board members, not overtly, but through carefully worded emails and casual conversations. I'd bring up a complex legal point, offer an insightful analysis on a market trend, always ensuring my brilliance was undeniable, my value to the firm irrefutable. I wanted to make myself indispensable, to make their task of firing me not just difficult, but potentially damaging to the firm's reputation. I also began to discreetly reach out to headhunters, not to find a new job, but to gauge my market value, to understand the landscape of power beyond John's immediate sphere. I needed to know my options, to understand the true cost of my potential departure, not just to me, but to the firm. One evening, while Cindy was out with friends, a new frequent occurrence, I found myself in John's office again. This time it wasn't an accident. I had observed his routine, knew precisely when he'd be out for his weekly poker game. I bypassed his security, a simple matter for someone who knew the system's back doors. I wasn't looking for emails this time. I was looking for something more substantial, something that could truly change the game. I found it tucked away in a hidden folder on his hard drive, encrypted but not beyond my capabilities. It was a series of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and a detailed ledger of illicit transactions tied to several major firm clients. Embezzlement, money laundering. The scale of it was staggering, far beyond a simple office affair. This wasn't just about getting me fired. It was about protecting a criminal enterprise, and I, the rising star, was becoming a liability. My fingers flew across the keyboard, copying everything, encrypting it, and sending it to my secure off-site server. The air in the office grew colder, the silence heavier. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. As I closed the laptop, leaving no trace of my presence, a new thought solidified in my mind. John Frost wasn't just my boss. He was a criminal. And Cindy, my wife, was complicit, whether she knew the full extent of it or not. The game had indeed changed. I wasn't just fighting for my job, I was fighting for control. And I knew exactly how to get it. What do you think Ethan's next move should be? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The evidence of John's malfeasance was a cold, hard truth, a weapon forged in the fires of betrayal. My initial shock had long since calcified into a glacial resolve. The corporate world, I now understood, was not a place for sentimentality, but for strategy. And I, Ethan, was about to play the most intricate game of my life. My plan began with a series of meticulously crafted, seemingly innocuous emails. To the firm's audit committee, I sent an anonymous tip detailing unusual patterns in a few of John's recent high-profile deals. No direct accusations, just enough data points to trigger an internal review. To a trusted, albeit slightly disgruntled senior partner, I casually mentioned my concerns about the firm's exposure to certain offshore entities, framing it as a proactive risk assessment. I knew he would follow up, his own ambition a useful lever. I wasn't just planting seeds of doubt, I was cultivating a garden of suspicion, carefully tending to each sprout. The first ripple appeared within days. John, usually unflappable, seemed distracted. His usual booming laugh was replaced by a forced chuckle, his eyes darting around the boardroom during meetings. He started canceling his regular golf games, his evenings consumed by urgent matters. Cindy, too, began to show cracks in her polished facade. She'd call me at the office, ostensibly to ask about my day, but her questions were laced with an undercurrent of anxiety. "Is everything all right with John?" she'd ask, her voice a little too casual. "He seems stressed." I'd offer a non-committal response, a shrug of indifference, letting her unease fester. The subtle signs of their deceit were now mirrored by the subtle signs of their growing fear. They were feeling the pressure, but couldn't pinpoint its source. My rage, once a burning inferno, had transformed into a surgical instrument. It was no longer about emotional catharsis. It was about precise, calculated dismantling. Each move I made was designed to tighten the noose, to isolate John, to expose his vulnerabilities without revealing my hand. I volunteered for a new internal task force focused on enhancing financial transparency, a move that put me directly in the path of the very irregularities I had uncovered. I became an indispensable voice in discussions about corporate governance, my insights sharp, my questions pointed, always framed as a commitment to the firm's integrity. The board, already rattled by the anonymous tip and the senior partner's concerns, began to lean on me. My reputation for meticulousness and unwavering ethics, once merely a professional asset, was now my greatest weapon. I was the clean-cut, trustworthy executive, the antithesis of the shadowy dealings I was subtly exposing. John, meanwhile, found himself increasingly on the defensive. His explanations for the unusual patterns were vague, his confidence wavering. He tried to dismiss the concerns as administrative oversights, but the audit committee, now fully engaged, wasn't buying it. I orchestrated a series of small, intelligent actions that began to shift the power dynamic. I took over the Sterling acquisition, citing John's overwhelming workload and the need for fresh eyes. This move put me in direct control of a deal that had been a key component of John's illicit activities. I quietly reassigned key personnel from John's team to mine, citing optimizing resource allocation. These were individuals I knew to be loyal to the firm's true interests, not John's. I was systematically dismantling his support structure, piece by piece, under the guise of corporate efficiency. Cindy, witnessing John's increasingly frantic state, grew more agitated. She tried to intervene, to defend John in casual conversations, but her efforts only served to highlight her own compromised position. I saw her watching me across the office, her eyes no longer holding the feigned affection, but a nascent fear. She knew something was wrong, that the ground beneath them was shifting, but she couldn't comprehend the architect of their impending downfall. The silence between us at home became a palpable thing, thick with unspoken accusations and chilling anticipation. One afternoon, John called me into his office, his face pale, his usual swagger replaced by a desperate tremor. "Ethan," he began, his voice strained, "I need your help. This audit, it's getting out of hand. They're asking questions about the offshore accounts." He was cornered, desperate. I looked at him, my expression unreadable, a mask of professional concern. "John," I said, my voice calm, precise, "I'm doing everything I can to ensure the firm's interests are protected. Transparency is paramount." I offered no comfort, no false promises, just the cold, hard truth of corporate protocol. He was sinking, and I was merely observing the process. The final piece of my immediate plan involved a carefully timed leak, not to the press, not yet, but to a specific, influential board member known for his unwavering moral compass and his disdain for corporate corruption. I compiled a concise, irrefutable dossier of John's financial crimes, stripped of any personal vendetta, presented as a clear and present danger to the firm's reputation and solvency. I left it on his desk, an anonymous package, a ticking time bomb. That evening, as the city lights began to twinkle outside my office window, I stood alone, looking out at the sprawling metropolis. The firm, once a symbol of my ambition, was now a chessboard, and I had moved all my pieces into position. John was exposed, Cindy complicit, and the board was on the verge of discovering the full extent of the rot. Tomorrow, the board would convene for an emergency session, called by the very member who received my package. The air was charged with an electric stillness, the calm before the storm. The stage was set, the players in their places. The curtain was about to rise on the final act. What do you think will happen at the emergency board meeting? Share your predictions in the comments below. The air in the boardroom was thick with an almost palpable tension, a silence so profound it hummed with unspoken accusations. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, an invited observer, my presence requested as a key contributor to the firm's recent tumultuous period. John, seated opposite me, looked like a man watching his own execution. His face was ashen, a sickly gray, his eyes darting frantically between the stern, unyielding faces of the board members and the thick binder of damning documents laid before them. The board chairman, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for impropriety preceded him, cleared his throat, the sound echoing ominously in the cavernous room. "John," he began, his voice devoid of any warmth or emotion, a flat declaration of judgment, "the evidence presented to us is unequivocally compelling. Allegations of systematic embezzlement, sophisticated money laundering schemes, and gross misuse of firm resources for personal gain. The intricate web of offshore accounts, the shell corporations meticulously detailed here, it's all laid bare." He tapped the binder with a manicured finger, the slight sound amplified in the silence. "We have cross-referenced these with internal audit reports, external financial records, and even a forensic accounting analysis. The discrepancies are not only undeniable, but staggering in their scope and audacity." John stammered, a desperate, pathetic attempt to defend himself, his voice cracking under the immense pressure. This is a misunderstanding. A malicious smear campaign orchestrated by disgruntled employees. I can explain every single transaction, every account." "There's nothing left to explain, Mr. Frost," another board member, a formidable woman whose legal acumen was legendary, interjected, her voice sharp as a razor. "The figures don't lie, and the sheer scale of it, it implicates this firm, our esteemed institution, in a criminal enterprise. Our reputation, our very existence, our fiduciary duty to our clients and shareholders, all are at stake because of your actions." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "The board has reviewed the comprehensive report. Your explanations are insufficient, contradictory, and frankly, insulting to our intelligence." The discussion that followed was swift, brutal, and utterly devoid of mercy. John's increasingly frantic pleas, his desperate attempts to deflect blame or beg for leniency, fell on deaf ears. The evidence I had meticulously gathered, the anonymous tip that had initiated the internal review, the strategically placed dossier that had sealed his fate, it all converged into an irrefutable mountain of proof. The board, after a brief, unanimous vote, delivered their verdict. John Frost was terminated immediately, effective this very second, with all benefits revoked. Furthermore, the firm would pursue aggressive legal action to recover the embezzled funds and prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. His carefully constructed empire, built on deceit and unchecked ambition, crumbled into dust in a matter of minutes. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the chairman's crisp command for security to escort John from the premises. My gaze drifted to the doorway. Cindy stood there, her face a mask of utter horror, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. She must have heard the verdict, the final crushing blow. Her own carefully constructed world, built on the shifting sands of John's illicit gains and her own complicity, was collapsing around her. The man she had conspired with, the man she had betrayed me for, was now a pariah, a criminal, his name synonymous with scandal, and she, by association, was irrevocably tainted. Her career, her professional standing, her carefully planned future, all incinerated in the scorching fallout. She looked at me then, her eyes pleading, searching for something, anything. A flicker of triumph, a hint of pity, a sign of the man she once knew. But I offered nothing. No smirk, no triumphant glare, no emotional response whatsoever. Just a calm, empty stare, as cold and unyielding as polished steel. The initial emotional shock had long passed. There was only the profound, chilling satisfaction of a plan executed with flawless precision. I felt no joy, no elation, no surge of vindictive pleasure, just a profound sense of quiet completion, a rebalancing of the scales. The anger that had once simmered beneath my controlled exterior had dissipated, replaced by an almost surgical clarity. This wasn't about revenge in the petty, emotional sense. It was about justice served with an almost clinical precision. I had not raised my voice, not made a single accusation in public. I had simply allowed the truth, once unearthed and meticulously presented, to do its devastating work. Their downfall was entirely their own making, a direct consequence of their choices, not my direct emotional intervention. I was merely the catalyst, the silent observer who held the match, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, financial audits, and corporate restructuring. The firm, reeling from the scandal, underwent a massive, painful overhaul. John Frost was indeed prosecuted, his name dragged through every financial newspaper, his reputation irrevocably destroyed. Cindy, unable to withstand the intense scrutiny, the professional ostracization, and the sheer weight of her own complicity, vanished from the corporate scene. Our divorce was finalized quickly, quietly, a mere formality. There were no arguments over assets, no bitter exchanges. She understood, I think, that she had lost far more than just a marriage. She had lost her moral compass, her integrity, her professional standing, and ultimately her future. During the firm's tumultuous period, a unique opportunity presented itself. With John gone, and the firm desperate for stable leadership, a new direction, and a complete overhaul of its ethical framework, I stepped forward. Leveraging my deep understanding of the firm's operations, my untarnished reputation for integrity, and a strategic partnership with a discerning private equity group I'd cultivated during my investigation, I made an offer the board, desperate to restore confidence and salvage the firm's legacy, couldn't possibly refuse. It wasn't a hostile takeover, it was a calculated rescue, a strategic acquisition. The corner office was mine now. The very same office John Frost once occupied, the same panoramic view of the sprawling Manhattan skyline. But it felt profoundly different. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal, but of reclamation, of a new beginning forged from the ashes of deceit. I sat at the expansive desk, the city lights twinkling below, a silent, glittering testament to the relentless march of ambition and the inevitable consequences of hubris. My new title, Chief Executive Officer. The firm, once a battleground, was now my domain. I wasn't the same Ethan who had discovered that damning email. The vulnerability had been stripped away, replaced by an armor of unyielding resolve. The trust I once freely gave was now a carefully guarded commodity, earned only through proven loyalty and transparent action. I had learned the hard way that the most dangerous betrayals often come from those closest to you, cloaked in familiarity and affection. But I had also learned that true power lies not in fleeting vengeance, but in absolute control. Control over oneself, control over one's destiny, and sometimes control over the very institutions that sought to break you. The past was a brutal, invaluable lesson, not a prison. I picked up a framed photo from my desk, an old picture of Cindy and me, smiling, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I looked at it for a long moment, a ghost of a memory, then placed it face down, its image no longer relevant to the present. My gaze shifted back to the city, a vast and different ocean of light and shadow, stretching endlessly into the horizon. A new chapter had begun, not just for the firm, but for me. And as I looked out, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips, cold as winter, sharp as ice. She never saw it coming. If you found Ethan's journey compelling and his ultimate triumph satisfying, please give this video a like. It helps us create more stories that explore the complexities of betrayal, strategy, and ultimate justice.